graphing some things that have different values. So notice on this one, I have an A value. And what did we say that our A value stands for? What's our new fancy word?
Amplitude.
Amplitude. So what is our amplitude this time? 1/2. Okay, do I have a B value this time? No, I mean,
Technically, yes.
technically it's 1, right? So 2 pi divided by 1 is still just 2 pi. So our period didn't change, which means that we didn't change it accordingly, right? We didn't get more squiggles or less squiggles, but we did change how tall and short it is, okay? So if we have 1/2, so I think the easiest way, like I said before, is going to be I still want to look at those key points. And because we didn't change our period, those key points are still going to happen at the same x values, which is nice. What is going to be different is now because our amplitude is 1/2, what y value is our maximum and minimum going to be at?
-1/2.
Correct. So for cosine, remember that we start at our maximum. So I'm going to start at 1/2. And for all of our trig functions, we always start and end at the same point. Okay. Then halfway in between is going to be our minimum, which this time we said was that -1/2. And then halfway in between there is going to be our zeros. So basically, it compressed it by 1/2. And again, remember that if I wanted to continue on the graph, we would just basically continue the pattern. So in some of your problems that ask you to work, it's going to say draw 2 full cycles. So you can either go negative with it and draw stuff before the y-axis, or you could draw another cycle to the right. Either way, but if it asks you to draw 2 full cycles, just realize that means you have to draw like 2 full complete cycles for that graph. Questions on that? Do y'all see where I'm getting those like x values and those y values? Yeah? Let's look at another one. So this time we have y equals 3 cosine. So again, what is our amplitude? 3. What is the period?
2 pi.
Yep. So this time, instead of compressing it, what has happened to our graph? So again, because I don't have a new b value, my x-axis does not change. But notice that we will have stretched the graph quite a lot. It makes it look like that. The amplitude's pretty straightforward. We're okay with the amplitude. Alright. So now let's look at what happens when we have a period change. It's a little bit different, but not super hard. Let's think about it. When we changed our amplitude, we changed our y values, correct? So now when we change our period of the graph, which values are we going to be changing?
X.
The x values. So again, that pattern, right, is still going to be the same. I start and end at a 0 for sine, but just where those numbers take place is going to be a little bit different. Okay? So this time, what is our amplitude? If there's not a number there, what's it understood to be?
1.
1. Okay? to divide by the 2. Okay? But what is our b value technically here? We can actually write this as 1/2 x, yes? So our b value is 1/2. So we have to take 2 pi and divide that by 1/2. Because my b is 1/2. So then we actually end up multiplying by the reciprocal, which gives us 4 pi. So it's going to have stretched out further, meaning that it's going to take longer for it to complete its full cycle, which is why it looks like there's less graph in the 2 pi, because we've stretched it out farther. So I'm going to label my my y-axis the same. Okay. But notice that instead, so normally I use each space, I make that pi over 2. But if I did pi over 2, notice that I wouldn't have enough squares this time to get all the way to 4 pi. So what I'm going to do instead is just count 1, 2, 3, 4, and label that as where my period is going to end, which would be at 4 pi. Does that make sense? So I know that that's the point that I want it to end, so I'm just going to label it 4 squares out. Because then I know that halfway in between would have to be 2 pi. Halfway in between 0 and 2 pi is pi. And then halfway in between those two would be 3 pi. Because remember, we can label our units whatever we want them to be as long as we're consistent. So pick easy units to do. And then from there, our graph is basically the same. So remember, for sine, we start and end at a 0. We have a 0 halfway in between. Then our max is halfway in between our first 2 zeros. And our minimum is halfway in between those 2 zeros. And it would work very similarly if we had a cosine graph. Or if we had made it to be where there's more period, like more squiggles up and down. So like if we had 2x instead, we would just label this as pi instead. So it all comes down to the labeling. That's what's going to be really important. So when I'm grading, you're really going to need to make sure that you label both your x and your y-axis, so that way I know where your points are at. So it's going to be super important. Questions on any of that?